I have 18 minutes, you say. I'll try to finish a lot of stuff because really happened a lot of things in the past 30 years. Where I have to say that if you look at the Chinese venture capital, it really mirrors the Chinese entire economy. Its growth in the past 30 years like crazy. I think this just release this productivity and people's drive to have a better life. Because in the past, you just cannot do that. You just cannot put it into reality. So I want to give this brief 30 years history into 5 different stages. Of course, different professors, scholars have different type of segment. This is my own point of view. Maybe it's wrong, but I want to do that as looking at venture capital as just as a startup company. So at the very beginning, the first stage, I would say this is Chinese venture capital at its seed stage, because then it just have some ideas of venture capital. Actually, first is 1985. We have a document, official document from Ministry of Science and Technology. Inside the document, for the first time ever, they mentioned the word technology venture capital. So that's the first time they have this as a government word. But it's not so popular because only within high-tech industry and high-tech, the parks. So, and the first venture capital firm was also born the same year, 1985, and it was entirely by state fund money, and they didn't really invest as equity, they invest as loans, and they get money from the government, and they place the money into different ventures, especially into high technology companies. But they also did something on different mature companies. It did something on the stock market also later on, when the stock market opened. During that period of time, I have to say, there were also a lot of foreign companies and domestic companies formed. The reason because during early 1990s, there was a big debate in the Chinese society, including intellectuals, including scholars, professors. I was not then, I was still in the US then, but I heard the debate over, friends of mine, and said that there was huge rejection on continuing economic reform. So pushed Mr. Deng Xiaoping had to go to the South, because South is a little bit, people are a little bit more opening up. So he went to the South to collect people's ideas, to get people's support to his idea of economic reform. So from 1990, this is early 1992, and from that time period, there are still local venture capital firms set up by local Ministry of Science and Technology, their local offices. For instance, Beijing, venture capital firm, Shanghai, Guangdong, Jiangsu, especially in the south. And then government also set up some other program to promote venture capital, like 863, that is set up in 1986 in March. So they called it 863 program, which is still currently alive, promote a lot of startup technological companies. And also, in that period of time, actually exactly in 1985, 2 foreign companies entered in China. One is IDG. It's not really a venture group in outside China, but they set up a IDG group inside China. The other is called China West. This China West was from a Chinese American from Silicon Valley. So, but venture capital is still pretty was still very unknown by the community. A lot of ordinary people, they didn't know what venture capital is. Because 1997, I went back to China. I was planning to give a lecture at Renmin University, and was planning on talking about venture capital. But the night before, I got a phone call from a very, very close friend. He said, I mean, you can never talk this topic. Stop it. I said, why? And he said, you haven't heard that, 2 weeks ago in Hunan province, about a month ago in Shenyang city, they, 2 group of people were executed because they are doing illegal fundraising. And then any money, but it's real. Any money outside banking system, then if you try to raise, that's illegal. I mean, only inside Ministry of Science and Technology, their system, you can call venture capital. So it's private issue only by this particular group, not ordinary people. That's why I call this stage is China venture capital industry. It's a seed stage. And the next stage, this also the seed stage, we have the first stock market set up. I think that's also on the entry of Alice entry of Shanghai Stock Exchange and Shenzhen Stock Exchange. Sorry about it. Oh, that's all right. This 2 stock exchange set up though, but debate still behind this. A lot of people, not only ordinary people, a lot of economists, scholars are strongly against this idea of setting up stock market because, this is really against the socialist or communist idea. And also the stock market is a pure capitalist thing. We as a socialist country, how can we pick up a capitalist thing? Another idea, base of their theory is that all the companies were listed at that time were state-owned enterprises, so we call SOEs. Okay, if you state-owned enterprises, everyone in the country is a shareholder. How can you treat a state-owned enterprise shares with others without our permission? We, as a citizen, we have the right to say yes and no, so we say no. There's a strong, force to say no to this idea of setting it up. So because facing that type of particular circumstances, I remember when I was in the undergraduate school in early 1980s, and I had a paper. I said, I believe that Russians economist, I forgot the name, whom, I don't think that idea could work because it really said you plan this economy, whatever activity, for the next 5 years. I said, how can it work? Because the demand will change, everything will change. You can never catch up the market. And my own classmates, I would say over 60% of them are strongly against my idea. So it's that type of mindset that make this opening of stock market very, very difficult. That's why when they started it up, they set it as different shares, state-owned shares, which is majority shares that cannot be treated. Only limited shares that are treatable. So this market is set up, but the trading volume is very, very small. I'm sorry, but the next is not very important. Should look at the stock market change over the years.
Sorry.
So this is not. I need to. This stage, I would say, the startup stage, when Mr. Cheng Sivei who was the head of one of the minority party members. I don't know if you know Chinese politics. In addition to Communist Party, we also have 8 minority parties. And if you're a party leader of the minority party, you are obligated to join the central government. So he was one of the minority party leader. He had Labor Party's leader. And he handed up a proposal, we call it proposal number 1, which really is the beginning of venture capital in China. Because in this proposal, he actually took a lot of time, starting from late 1980s, early 1990s. He went to Silicon Valley many times to visit different venture capital companies to learn the idea how to use venture capital to promote domestic technology innovation. And by the way, it was Mr. Cheng Siwei invited me to come from Renmin University, where I was teaching, and currently I am in his research center. Unfortunately, he just passed away in July. But Mr. Cheng Siwei has been known as father of venture capital. Really, he set up 3 stages how to promote venture capital. If you look back, every stage is really followed his own original plan. So he's a great leader in that sense. The end of 1990s, governments started to allow non-state-owned enterprise to get into the market. So the stock market became a little bit liquid then. On the stage 3, I would say this stage, I called it post-startup stage, because it's still a startup. Because in China, still, venture capital after 1998 become very hot topic. Venture capital looks like everybody talk about the venture capital. I was then invited to teach in Renmin University, Beijing University, Tsinghua University, because not a lot of professors then had this training in venture capital. I had some background to do research with Professor Lerner at Harvard Business School in 1995. So then, even though a lot of people are knowing venture capital, but it's still not very mature stage, especially before this venture capital become everybody known. In China, that there's a very strange phenomena. I was among your friend Lu Yuebing, maybe one of them, among those very few who can speak both English and Chinese to communicate with 2 groups. Because then there are 2 groups of venture capital list, and they played in different market and speak their own language. They play by their own rule. They have their own community, set up their own conferences. So it looks like 2 groups of people never commute to each other. Very strange, but that's the reality, because some people coming from overseas, we call sea turtles, 海龟, and they know what exactly was the rule of overseas venture capital industry plays. So they did the same thing. On the other hand, domestic venture capitalists, most of them are from government officials or maybe from industry. But then at the very beginning, a lot of them from government officials, they didn't know really what venture capital is. Just follow the book and follow others' examples. But they later become very successful venture capitalists. I have to skip a lot of things because of time. From 2004 to 2009, I would say the beginning of development stage of Chinese venture capital industry, because in 2004 there are 2 different events happened. One is when government started, of course, postponed the ChiNext because of, internet bubble. But they start up a new board called SME board in Shenzhen market, and that created kind of access place for the venture capital. So domestic venture capital started to boom. At the same time, Silicon Valley Bank organized a group of delegation group of people, venture capitalists, to come to China. Before then, there are venture capitalists from the U.S., but they're not mainstream. They are, from this and then majorly from Chinese, overseas Chinese. They understood China, what happened better, I guess. But from 2004, really the first mainstream venture capital group came to China. They realized, wow, China is so different than their original imagination. So they opened their door to invest and set up their companies in China. Before this, even though Chinese venture capital was already very hot, but not to ordinary venture capital or mainstream venture capitalists in the U.S. I remember I was invited to a conference. At that time, the U.S. have a venture capital and seed fund association. I don't know if they are still there right now, but 2001, I was invited to go to their conference to give a talk on Chinese venture capital. We have a separate session on China. I remember when I walked to behind some venture capitalist, I looked, I overheard their talking. One of them pointed out our sign saying, "Look at that, it's venture capital in China. What does that mean?" And the other said, "Have no idea." So we had six presenters then. We waited for anybody to come to our session. Nobody showed up. And later, I think there are 2 other reporters or whatever joined up, so we have 8 of us all together. And we instead had a panel. We just had, everyone present, so that was not a very pleasant experience to us. But anyways, then nobody knew venture capital in China already being quite hot. But after 2004, like China concept became very hot in Silicon Valley. If you have a Chinese idea, or my friends in Chinese companies, if they know a little bit venture capital, they were invited to join the venture capital group. So during that time, China started to have mainstream venture capitalists coming in China. They're really the leading force to lead a lot of Chinese venture capitals to how the operation should go. In addition to that, Chinese government also allowed Chinese domestic companies to be listed overseas. That also helped foreign venture capital to come in, because you can invest in and you can get out. Of course, they have to set up a different company offshore, so that they put US dollar in that company, and that company control the domestic Chinese company, so that they have a way to go in, they had a way to get out. But anyways, we Chinese believe, you have the rule to rule, we have a way to going around. So, and if you look at this graph, you can see really this is the top 50 venture capital firms that was had been ranked by company 0 to IPO. And you can see 2004, before 2004 even, foreign companies or international companies, VC companies, always the strongest. But then after 2008, of course, because international financial crisis and all that, Chinese venture capital company, domestic, started to pick up. Not only that, the top number one was the one that Eddie mentioned, Shenzhen Capital Group, and I think they've been on top for many years from 2010. And this stage 5, is from 2009 until now. I think to last year, I think this is the development stage of Chinese venture capital. And there are several things that you can see why I call this, because Chinese venture capital, for one thing, from the total investment amount and total amount raised in venture capital, ranked number 2 next to the US, very hot market. And also in terms of exit, also because ChiNext was officially opened it up, gave a lot of domestic venture capital companies a way to exit. So for the first time, Chinese domestic VCs matched the international partners. This ChiNext, the first time, very, very big until now. It's still very hot in this market, because by Chinese regulation, if your price, the trading price is higher than 50%, you have to stop, or 80% have to stop. So all 28 stocks were really suspended because of the high price increase. How many minutes do I have? Yeah, and this is the 2013. By the way, the government stopped this market for 1 year for their so-called regulation purposes. But currently, it's still very hot. Currently, I think it's over 300, close to 400 companies, and there are half of them. Over 50% is VC and PE backed companies. So this is my prediction. I will speak very fast. First of all, the government still set up very, very strong force to promote venture capital. They just announced early this year by the central government, they're going to set up a 40 billion RMB fund as a so-called emerging industry fund. It's a government-backed fund, so it's a fund by government called Government Guardians Fund. Government Guardian Fund's been on for the past 10 years also. It's been very effective, but not really a lot of people know what's going on inside this Government Guidance Funds, because they asked some professors, did some research for them. To me, I don't think that's a very objective research, because they get funding from the government. Anyways, another fund is, they set up another fund, 60 billion RMB for the small business enterprise funds, SME fund. And this also will play a very important role in promoting startup companies, especially in high-tech, high-growth industry. And I think China's financial system will continue to reform, and it's been reforming right now. So private people can set up a pure private bank inside China right now, and it never had happened before. So venture capital ecosystem will start to become better and better. So China's venture capital really moved to the expansion stage. From later stage, because in the past they always invest in later stage, pre-IPO, because they have a huge amount of money and they want to get a quick result. They lost the venture capital, the essence of being patient capital. They're not patient. Currently, they have to move to early stage, because later stage deals are very, very hot, very, very expensive already to get in. We believe the Chinese domestic IPO market is going to be stronger, so that drive venture capital industry to develop further. And currently, the Chinese ChiNext is not only one player. There's also called new third board, and it's even hotter than the ChiNext. It's been like many venture capital companies or PE companies, their list is on this new third board. and they train their rules, become a different type of animal, I think. So a lot of new things happening in China, but personally, I believe the Chinese venture capital industry, still 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, but moving forward from long run. Thank you.